Okay, so this is the Stoic Jew Shiur, part two. Like I said, generally I don't want to do have any continuity. I want to like finish each thing each week and then move on to something else. But last week was first time we didn't really know what we were doing. So let's do this. Let's review what we did last time. Okay. And then there were a couple more points which I don't think we got a chance to like touch upon. Okay. So if anyone has any questions or interjections during the review, then please jump in because I want this to be like a very free flowing, like we're learning this together. Okay, we're not I'm trying not to prepare. Okay, which of course I fail because I'm me, but I'm trying not to prepare. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by just rereading the third translation, but I'll display all of them on the screen. Okay, at the start of the day, tell yourself, I shall meet people who are officious, which we said means like annoyingly bureaucratic, ungrateful, abusive, treacherous, malicious, and selfish. In every case, they've got like this because of their ignorance of good and bad. But I have seen goodness and badness for what they are, and I know that what is good is what is morally right, and what is bad is morally wrong. Or in the other translations, I have seen the nature of the good that it is beautiful, and of the bad that it is ugly. Or I've seen the nature of good is the right, and of ill the wrong. And I've seen the true nature of the wrongdoer himself, and know that he's related to me, not in the sense that we share blood and seed, but by virtue of the fact that we both partake of the same intelligence, so a portion of the divine. None of them can harm me anyway, because none of them can infect me with immorality, nor can I become angry with someone who's related to me or hate him, because we were born to work together like feet or hands or eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against each other is therefore unnatural, and anger and rejection count as working against. Okay, so let's just review our questions, and then we did not actually go through thoroughly and like see which questions we answered, but I'll review all of them, and then we'll see which ones we did answer, and then we'll see what hasn't been answered, and then we'll move on and see where we end up. Okay, so questions: how many distinct points are being made here? How do they relate to one another? Two, what is the main idea? Three, why should you tell yourself this in the morning? Yeah, Shmuel.
So, Rabbi, I don't know, I don't remember exactly if this question came up. I actually have another question.
Mm. Okay, so I'll finish reading these, and then we can tack yours on to the end. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Why should you tell yourself this in the morning? Why in the morning? Why tell yourself? Why every morning? What does this indicate about the kind of idea, about this kind of idea, or how Marcus is using it? Four, what do we get from this list of people at the beginning? Are these just examples, or are they like mutually exclusive, all-encompassing categories? Five, what does he mean that these flaws stem from ignorance, and what is the basis of that claim? Six, what is the nature of good and evil? I'll put that in italics. What might Marcus have meant by that? How does this fit into his argument? Seven, likewise, what does he mean by that the good is beautiful and the bad is ugly? How does that fit into his argument? Eight, what exactly is he learning from the fact that the other person shares in a portion of the divine? And how does this fit into his overall argument or technique? In what sense is he like these people by nature? And in what sense is he different? Why is this relevant? Nine, what can he mean when he says that these people cannot harm him? What is his basis for saying that? It seems like these people can harm him. And then how does this or doesn't it square with our morning request in halacha from Hashem to save us from these categories of bad people? 10, what is the metaphor of the body parts at the end, and how specific is this metaphor? Okay, meaning like Noah pointed out that hands work with each other, but teeth work against each other. What is his point about cooperation? 11, what type of working together is he envisioning here, especially when he lists these bad qualities? And yeah, but these people do have these bad qualities, and they do pose problems in a society. So what are we supposed to do about that? Okay, Shmuel, you have a 12th question?
Yeah. So, what is the connection between intelligence and the divine?
Ah, okay. All right. So what is the connection between intelligence and the divine? Now, I'm going to actually refrain from answering that question today, and the reason why is because chapter two of the meditations is the first time he actually talks about what his idea of the soul is. Okay, so it's possible that like we could delve into it now, but I think it'll be more fruitful if we wait till next time. But that is a good question. I'm kind of surprised we missed that one. Okay,
All right.
good call. Okay,
Thanks, Rabbi.
yeah. Okay. So let's try to review what we said last time. Okay. Anyone want to take a shot at? I actually meant to go back and cheat and listen to what Esty said at the end of last time, but if anyone wants to try to say what they recall from last time, then we'll start from there, and then we'll go through and see which questions we answered. Not to put everybody on the spot, but that's what I'm doing.
Not me.
Hmm. Go ahead.
That he is aware of himself, that every morning he wants to remind himself of something because he is aware of a pull to be involved with other people, um, like to be affected by what other people are doing that he thinks is wrong, and he wants to prepare himself to remember that these people actually can't hurt him. It's a choice of his own,
Right.
and he's preparing himself to work with them in the way that he believes people can work together for their good.
Okay, good. That was a good summary. Okay. So you want to actually, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. I'm gonna chart down what we didn't really take notes on the ideas last time, so I'm just gonna like number in an attempt to answer this first question here. I'm gonna attempt to number like what the main ideas are. Okay, and we'll discuss them as we go through. Okay, so number one is morning reminder. Okay, is that because there is a pull into the same distorted framework that these guys are trapped in, we need I guess a counterforce. Okay, and in Hebrew we call this a zechira. Okay, like a reminder. All right, to prevent shikha. Okay, is forgetting. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, and again we'll talk about these in a second. Okay, number two is the idea that um the cause of these bad qualities is ignorance. Okay, is that the only difference between these people and Marcus is that they are ignorant of the fact that, you know, I guess of the good and evil, and that's what leads them to do these things thinking they are good. Okay, and this is where we did the Rambam's analogy in the Mor Nevuchim, where he says that that if you have a blind person who a blind person is going to injure other people and himself, and it's not because he wants to injure them, it's just because he's actually trying to do good stuff for himself, but because he lacks the ability to see, then that ends up leading to a bunch of mistaken actions. So to these guys, they lack knowledge, and in their efforts to do good, or in their misconception of what the good is, then they end up harming themselves and other people. Okay, so that was point number two. Point number three is that these people can't harm you. Okay, which I don't think, Esty, you mentioned in your summary. Anyone want to try summarizing what they what we said last time about the fact, like, how can you say these people can't harm you? Yeah, Shmuel.
What that means is that when it comes to harm, the only real harm that happens is physical. And if someone is sort of just like their ideology is wrong, then that can't in itself hurt you, but the way you react to it can.
Okay, I think you misspoke. You said the only real, or unless I misheard, you said the only real harm is physical. You meant something
Like
else, right?
if well, I suppose if someone, I might be wrong on this.
Because the
I
guy
might be
could
a little
punch you,
no.
right? The guy could punch
Yeah,
you,
the guy could punch you, right? I mean, I
right?
guess also like psychological damage is a thing, but the way the main point is the way you react to it is really what hurts you, and
Okay,
otherwise
right.
pretty much yeah.
Okay, so that half of what you're saying is correct, is that the real harm comes in how you react to it. Okay, anyone want to try stating the what he means by the type of harm? Yeah, Risa?
If you take on the other person's assumptions to be true,
Yeah.
then you're being harmed. And I'm just kind of guessing here. But if you're like taking on their worldview and incorporating it into yours, then that is
Yeah.
the harm. If you're like absorbing their
Okay.
thoughts.
Yeah. Okay, so the only realm in which you can be harmed is in the non-physical realm. Okay, and I'm leaving that intentionally vague for a second. Okay, the non-physical realm. I'm actually going to read I came across this after I gave Shir last week. The introduction by Waterfield, by this person who translated this, because he states it clearly. And as I read this, I want us to consider the question of A, do we think it's true? And B, do we think Judaism agrees or disagrees with it, and to what extent? Okay, this is going to go into a new point. Okay, so yeah, we're doing a simultaneous like review on new points here. Okay, so here's what Robin Waterfield says. He says Marcus begins the second notebook, which is the effective start of the book, with a statement of a fundamental Stoic tenet: the only thing that is good is moral virtue, and the only thing that is bad is moral vice or imperfection. Everything else falls into the class of indifference. Okay, indifference meaning the sense of like, it is indifferent to my good or bad, and it is careless talk to describe an indifferent as good or bad. This is a radical thought, since it accuses almost all of us, along with our laws and institutions, of being misguided in our assessment of good and bad. However, many indifferents can be rated on a scale of value, even if they cannot be rated as good or bad. Their value depends on whether they aid an aspirant, meaning someone who's like trying to like aspire to the good, whether or not they aid an aspirant's progress towards virtue. And so consideration of the value of things allows us to draw distinctions within the infinite class of indifference, such that some of them are preferred indifference, while others, the rest, are dispreferred. Okay, and I'm going to highlight these because these are terms that we should try to get into our vocabulary in this discussion. For example, strictly speaking, health is neither good nor bad, since it is neither virtue nor vice. But health is still to be preferred over sickness because, in obvious ways, ill health can impede a person's path towards virtue. Okay, so let's just summarize this in our own words here. Okay, so actually, anyone want to try summarizing it? I can always tell my understanding, but I've thought about this a lot. Yeah, Michael.
Like the only way you can truly benefit yourself or hurt yourself is through your own actions, and acting, either you benefit yourself by acting in line with your nature, with a moral vice, he called it, a moral virtue, or you can hurt yourself by acting in line with like outside of your nature. And then anything outside. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then anything else that's not either your own action, which is in line with your nature, or your own action which is not in line with your moral nature, would be considered indifferent because it's neither objectively good or bad, because it can't objectively harm you.
Yeah.
But certain situations do lend themselves more to moral virtue, to acting in line with your nature. So you could call it a preferred indifferent.
Okay, good. All right, so let's just go through a couple examples of this, okay? Just to get it clear, and then we'll ask whether we agree with it and whether Judaism agrees with it, okay? So, like I said, someone can punch you, right? And it might hurt, okay? But neither the punch nor the physical pain are bad, because neither the punch nor the physical pain affect your virtue, okay? The only thing that affects your virtue is a choice to like make a bad decision, or to view what happened to you in a distorted way, which is what, okay, I know I'm gonna get this wrong all the time. I already got it wrong. Rasa or Risa?
Rasa.
Rasa, okay. I just have to remember it's not like the Hebrew word for Torah. Okay, Rasa. This is what Rasa was saying, is that if you take on their distorted worldview, that's the real harm. Okay, so really, again, this is a radical idea, because it's saying that nothing physical that happens to you is actually bad, and nothing physical that's good to you is actually good. And not only that, nothing emotionally bad that happens to you is actually bad, and nothing emotionally good that happens to you is good. Yeah, David?
Would that mean that like he would say that punishment shouldn't exist? Because like punching you technically wouldn't be like bad. Like why would you punish that?
Good question. That's a good question, and that's something that is especially good for an emperor, because he was in charge of the laws, right? Yeah, so I'm going to put that question on hold for a second. In fact, I'm going to write it down so that we don't forget it. Okay. So this was David's question is, what role, if any, should punishment play? Okay, yeah. I'm going to just hold off on that until we make sure that we clarify this idea here. Okay, so, but at the same time, it's not like they are totally indifferent, okay? Meaning, this does not mean that a person would say, I don't care if I'm healthy or sick, since both of them are physical. Clearly, being healthy is going to make it easier for you to pursue virtue than and being sick is going to make it easier for you to fall into vice. Okay, and the example that I like to give here is when Rabbi Akiva was having, was being tortured to death and he was having his flesh combed, with iron combs, he wouldn't say, it doesn't matter to me. He'd obviously say that having your flesh combed makes it, presents more impediments to like being able to like be involved in Torah and mitzvos. So he would prefer to not have his flesh combed. But it is not, he's not truly being harmed. Yeah, Michael?
Can you just explain what is so radical about this? Like, just to elaborate, if
Yeah.
you hold that,
Go ahead.
like, if you hold that the only good is moral virtue, then I think
Yeah.
what the rest of this makes a lot of sense. So, is that what's radical, or do you think people agree with that, and then the rest is like they don't agree that naturally
So I'm
follows?
saying what's radical is because first, number one, we don't feel this way. We feel that we are actually being harmed when something happens to our possessions or to our body or to our emotions. So I think from a psychological standpoint, it is radical. And I also think from a philosophical standpoint, I think if you said to someone that there is no such thing as any good that exists in the physical world, then like even that is something that people would challenge, and that's why I actually want to ask about, do we hold by this in Torah?
But then, so they would then disagree with the premise that the only good is moral virtue, or
Yeah, it seems like they would hold that there's some other good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Ezra.
Yeah, just to clarify, does he mean good for humans or good in general?
So it's a good question. He definitely means good for humans. I don't know what his take or the Stoic take is on goodness in the world, like outside of humans. I don't even know if they have such a concept. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, that we'll have to keep on the back burner, like maybe on the shelf behind the stoves. Okay, just as we read more. Yeah, Esty?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question fully. Was he asking about social good and social bad?
I thought he was asking, Ezra, you were asking like metaphysical good, like in the universe? Uh-oh.
Yeah, like just does he mean only for humans or metaphysical good or for animals?
Okay, yeah, right. Okay, he froze for a
Okay,
second.
so then I'm going to ask, was that, what about if somebody can do like good or bad for society as opposed to an individual?
Okay, right. So that's the flip side of David's question. Which is which is what then does it mean to do good for society? Is that even possible? Okay. And here, this is something that he addresses directly because he does say, I mean, I don't know, he implies, he says, that we are born to work together, like feet, like hands, or like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. So presumably they're working towards some good. But the question is, what would that even mean if the only good you could do is to yourself,
Would he say that someone can harm society?
Right. So that's the other question as well, is, hold on a second, is can someone harm society? Okay. Yeah. Reza?
Would something that creates an opportunity to do good or like build character also have some element of goodness within it? Because isn't like a tenet of Stoicism like courage? Like
Okay.
would that also have like a secondary good like upon it,
Okay.
even though
So
it doesn't inherently have good
would that be good or just
like
a
opportunity?
preferred indifferent, right? Yeah. Okay. So any other questions on this? Because we then should tackle these. Okay, so I personally think, okay, and then you can feel free to challenge me here. I would say that that an action that builds character is just a preferred indifferent. Okay, so let's take an example of this. Okay, let's say the practice of saying thank you. Okay, when someone does something nice for you. So saying thank you, the decision to say thank you. Well, actually, maybe that's going to be a complicated example. Well, I'll say this. Okay, the habit of saying thank you is something that reminds you that you aren't owed things and that the world doesn't revolve around you and that this person made a decision to benefit you in some way, and acknowledging that is in line with moral virtue in the sense that you are A, recognizing a truth and avoiding falsehood, and B, you're promoting something good in society, because when you thank them, that actually promotes their virtue of doing good to you, you know? So I would say that at the very least, the habit of saying thank you is a preferred indifferent. But it seems like what would you say about the decision to say thank you itself? Like, in other words, let's say you genuinely have an outpouring of thanks to someone. Would that be an actual good, or is that just a preferred indifferent? In other words, the question is like, how internal does this go? Like, is the soul realm of good and bad just in your mind, or is it in the decisions to act as well? And like, how far do you take that? What do you guys say? Yeah, Ezra?
Yeah, I would say that the actions are really they aren't really relevant at all. They're just indicators of what your virtues are. But like whether you actually act, of course, if you don't act, then that means your virtues are bad. But the actual actions don't seem relevant.
Okay, so this is like a classical question of, let's say you have two people who are both generous, charitable people, and one person doesn't have any money, and the other person does have money and gives it. So would you say that they're equal because internally they're both virtuous, or would you say that the person who's actually doing good is more is superior? And if he's superior, in what sense is he superior? I mean, this gets to Este's question about what does it mean to do good for the society or to do good actions. Ezra, you want to answer that question first, because since that came from what you were saying?
Yeah, I would say that it's very possible that by acting that could lead to like greater virtue, but just because he did the action itself doesn't make him more virtuous.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing because it could lead to more virtue. It could lead to more virtue. Okay, I hear that. I was gonna say that's infinite regression, but I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think that's the case. Yeah, Michael, are you gonna answer?
I mean, I was gonna say that I think, at least according to the Stoics, specifically acting in line with moral virtue or your nature is what's valuable.
Right.
Like Marcus Aurelius says to like stop thinking about what a good man is and be one. Like he seems to put, I don't know if Judaism agrees, but he seems to put a lot more emphasis on action. So if he says that part of virtue is like justice and wisdom, I think those are two of the four. So then I
in
think
other words, yeah.
that,
So that's the flip side of what Ezra's saying that having a virtuous character itself is only setting the stage for virtuous action, and really doing the action, making the decision, like actualizing, well, just put it in Torah terms, being bocher b'tov, choosing good, is actually going to be superior to that. Shmuel?
Yeah.
So, but the action itself is not necessarily a good action unless you intend for it to specifically serve the purpose of being a good action. For instance,
Correct.
if I give somebody like I'm a server, so if I give somebody food, they'll thank me. My action isn't in itself virtuous. But if I came in intending, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Okay.
let's take I'm gonna take another example that just takes it out of the realm of a job. But like, let's say you give tzedakah to someone. That's one case, and the other case is your parent forces you to give tzedakah to someone, right? So in one case, the fact that it's coming from, we'll do extreme cases. In one case, it comes from the fact that you recognize that I am a human being and this person is a human being, and I happen to have resources that this person lacks, and they have a need, and I would like to provide for that need. So that's like a good act of tzedakah. And then the other case is a person is just forced to do it and brings about the same results, but that second person would not be, that act is not stemming from virtue. So it's not the result, and it's not even the physical action. It's the bocher b'tov. It's the choice to do the good action. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I feel like virtue can't exist without like there being like physical things to like interact with. Like how can you have a concept of like charity if there's nothing to like give or receive or anyone like in need or anything in need?
Right. So I think that's where he is. So certainly there are other people, okay, other people exist, who are also the same as you in the sense that they also have an intellect, or a portion of the divine, what he's saying. And then in terms of the resources that you have to do good with, there are preferred indifferents. So let's say like money is not good in its own right, but it is good because it can facilitate you getting food, which is also not good in its own right. But if you take care of your body, then that's also not good in its own right. But then you can be involved in the pursuit of virtue. So like you're right that like you can't just have like physical intellects in jars like being virtuous. You have to actually like, you are a human and you are interacting in a world with other human beings and other preferred indifference that you can like distribute to them. But does that answer your question? That you need? Okay, yeah, right. Okay, so I think we're answering Este's question. Well, first of all, Raisa, does this answer your question, or are we still undecided about it? That it sounds like what we're saying. I'll try to restate it here. It sounds like what we're saying is that you can. Okay, let's split into three categories. Okay, you can have an action that is purely to build character. Okay, then you can have an action that is there's two categories: an action that's purely to build character, and then an action that is both building character and is actually doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in our example of like saying thank you, then when a person says thank you and means it, or when a person gives, tzedakah, gives charity and does it for the right reasons, that is good. And it also happens to set you up for doing future virtue, like Ezra was saying. But then other actions are more like exercising, where you are creating the potential for better decisions in the future, or making it easier for you to engage in this in the future. Like, I'll give you a weird example. I try to be a very careful driver, and I am of the opinion that when you are turning at any point, you should use your turn signal. Okay, even if there's no one around, even if you're just like pulling out of your driveway. And the reason why I maintain that is because you'd say, well, that doesn't really do anything because no one is seeing the turn signal. But what you're doing is you're getting yourself into the habit of using your turn signal, and you'll do it more automatically. And that is good for the system if you're using your turn signal, because those of us who are in New York know that there are a bunch of people who don't use the turn signals, and like they create all these problems and they create potential for accidents. And so you're practicing virtue. So when I use my turn signal in the driveway, I am not doing a virtuous act, but I'm practicing virtue to make it easier for the future.
Yeah, a habit that would like maximize the repetition of good intention.
Right. Or even the repetition, or I could say also like what do you call it? Chipping away at the resistance you have, like making it more natural to you, or even making it more automatic. Like there are these things, or like making it into a norm in your society. Like, let's say, for example, you are let's say, okay, you see certain societies in which there are like trash bins that are overflowing with trash because people miss, and then they don't pick it up. And then there are other cases, there are other like buildings or rooms where people are careful about that. So if people see you throwing away the trash and making sure it gets into the bin, that might prime them to do the same as well, and then everyone is doing it, and then it makes it's better. So it builds character through creating a norm in society. So I think there are like probably a lot of different ways that this can build good character. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've answered your question, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we got that. Okay. Now Este's question. Okay. What does it mean to do good for society? Is that possible? Okay. Have we answered that? Because the way we're saying it now. Oh, and let me back this up with a Rambam. Okay. Where can I find this Rambam? Probably in my more Nevuchim translations. Actually, hold on. I don't trust this. Hold on. Okay, we're gonna go into one of my favorite tangents, but it's very relevant to this. Okay, and if you've heard me say this, go through this spiel before, then hold off so we can have other people experience this for the first time. Where is this? Okay, translations. Sorry, text. More Nevuchim. Okay, I think no, that is definitely an old one. Oh, that's also definitely an old one. Okay, this might be the wrong folder. 53. Oops, sorry, 53. Okay, this is not a current translation. I can tell because it's in the wrong font, but this will have to suffice. Okay, yeah, I'll read this and I'll modify it as necessary. Okay, so this is the Rambam in the More Nevuchim 353. This chapter treats of the meaning of the three terms which we find necessary to explain, namely chesed, okay, which we translate as kindness, mishpat, justice, and tzedakah, righteousness. You know what? Hold on just a second. I might have a more current translation on chesed, mishpat. Moreh 353. No, okay, fine. All right, this is what we got here. Okay. So he said, so okay, so I'm actually gonna skip chesed because I don't want to get caught up into that. So he says the word tzedakah is derived from tzedek, which means righteousness or uprightness. The meaning, okay, hold on a second. I have to conceal something. Okay, the meaning of righteousness is to bring every lawfully governed being in line with its lawful principle, which is a fancy way of saying to apply to correctly apply the law, okay, and to give every existing thing that which is proper for its existence. Okay, he'll give examples in a second. But in the books of the prophets, fulfilling the duties imposed upon you with regard to others is not called tzedakah in conformity with the first sense. If you pay a hired man his wages or pay a debt, this is not called tzedakah. Okay, so let me just explain this for 1 second, okay? So he's saying there's two definitions of tzedakah. One is basically if someone has a legal right to something and you give that to them, that is tzedakah. And then the second one is if you take a being and you give them what is befitting for their existence, then that is also tzedakah. So, but then he says in the Tanakh, it only uses tzedakah in the second sense, not the first sense. So for example, if you pay a worker their wages, that is in line with this first definition, but Tanakh doesn't call it that. It doesn't call it tzedakah. Okay. On the other hand, the good we bestow upon others out of virtue is called tzedakah, such as alleviating the suffering of the afflicted. Okay, so let's think about this example for 1 second. Okay, let's say you have a person who is afflicted because they don't have food, and you give them food, or someone is sick and you visit them in the hospital, or they don't have clothing and you give them clothing. Okay, so what makes that action tzedakah? Okay, and again, if you've heard me say this before, don't answer. Okay, what would you think based on the Rambam's definition here? What makes it tzedakah when I give food to a hungry person? Yeah, Michael.
Like necessary for his nature is that he has food. So
Yeah,
you're
right. So you
fulfilling
would
what he
think
needs.
that Rambam is saying that a sick person needs food, and when you give them food, you're bringing them in line with their nature. You're giving them something which is good for their nature, and that's what makes it tzedakah. Okay, but okay, thank you. I don't know if you did this intentionally, but you fell into the trap question, right? Okay, so that's not what the Rambam says is tzedakah. Okay, so brace yourself. Therefore, the Torah says, with reference to the returning of collateral to the poor man, so he could use it at night, and it shall be tzedakah for you. For when you follow the path of virtue, you do tzedek to your rational soul, for you have given it in accordance with its rightful claim. For this reason, every virtue is called tzedakah. Okay, so what is the Rambam saying here? So he's saying when you give a hungry person food, that's not tzedakah because you're bringing them in line with their nature, or you're giving them what is good for their existence. It's called tzedakah because you are doing an action which is in line with your rational nature. Okay, now it happens to be that helping someone else who is a fellow creature who needs food get that food, is acting in line. I mean, that is acting in line with your rational nature because you're seeing I am a human being just like this person, and they deserve food just as much as I do. But what makes it tzedakah is you're bringing your character in line with your nature. Okay, so that's like a radical concept of tzedakah. Yeah, Ezra.
Do you think that's only when tzedakah is? Is it possible to have tzedakah where you bring someone else's nature in line, like fulfill their nature?
Okay, so let's think about that question for a second. Okay, so Ezra's saying, is there a case where you are doing tzedakah to another person by bringing them in line with their nature? What would you say? Or doing what is like fitting for their nature? Yeah, David?
But wouldn't we just say that that's like virtuous to like do it? So wouldn't that just also inherently be helping your nature?
It would also be helping your nature. But Ezra's saying is could you have a case where it is good, it's tzedakah in other words, it's definitely tzedakah because it's in line with your nature. It's serving your nature, but can it also be tzedakah by virtue of helping them? Yeah, Isaiah? Oh, you're
Can't
unmuted.
change other
Oh,
people.
yeah. Sorry, say it again.
I feel like I'm inclined to say like you can't change other people's natures for them.
Okay, that's one approach, right? What you could say, since you can't actually control another person's nature, then there's nothing that you can do that is actually like benefiting their nature. David, you want to say another answer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, although that is true that you can't actually change that person, I mean, insofar as this being tzedek, then if you have brought that further, whether it's within you or outside of you, you have brought that forth. I think you still brought that forth nonetheless.
Brought that forth in you or in them?
In them.
How does, if I give them food, how am I achieving tzedakah in them?
Insofar as they're now like being able to act in a more, if they had lacked that food, they would not be able to act in the way that is best for them to be acting. And now that you have brought that forth, you brought forth their ability to act in the way that's best for them to act.
Right, but isn't that just giving them a preferred indifferent? And let's say the guy is a glutton, right? And giving him food is going to make him like distant from his ability to act in line with his good. Right?
That's true.
Yeah, Noah?
I think you're headed in the direction I was going, but like if I'm looking at someone and I don't believe that an action is for his highest good, like why would my acting against that, like how could I accept that as actually being for his highest good? Like, oh, I'm just going to trust him that, you know, he really needs illicit drugs at this moment, so I'll supply him with money for the illicit drugs, even though to me that sounds like not a good idea.
Yeah, right.
So it feels like it's a break in the logic to try to do that. You have to rely on your own rationality, for better and worse, maybe.
Right. So just to make sure I'm understanding you, so you're coming down on the side that you can't really achieve tzedakah in the other person. You can make a choice of tzedakah towards them based on your own, assessment or whatever. But at the end of the day, what they do with as the recipient of your action is really up to them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think, especially like if you think about like these other ideas or rules about tzedakah, like how am I going to have like the appropriate feelings about it if I don't actually believe that I'm doing something beneficial?
Right. So. Yeah. I was thinking of another example in tzedakah where like you have to restore the person to their former state of wealth, and that's regardless of whether they related to their wealth properly or not. Like that's the halacha. Yeah, Michael?
I mean, I think what we're saying makes sense, which is, if I'm understanding correctly, that your act of giving it is not what the tzedakah would be. It's their act of eating it, which is like bringing them back to their
See, I don't
nature.
even think that them eating food, that Marcus Aurelius would say that is, or sorry, I don't think Marcus Aurelius would say that that's good, and I don't even think the Rambam would say that that's tzedek, right? Intrinsically, at least, right? If the person is eating food because they recognize, oh, you know what, we had this pasuk in Mishlei, right? Hold on a second. 2 weeks ago, right? 13:30. 25. Tzaddik ochel l'sova nafsho ubetem rishayim techsar. A tzaddik eats to satisfy his nefesh, his soul, but the belly of the wicked will lack. So if this guy is a tzaddik who you're giving food to, and he eats in order to, as like, brain fuel, in order to be able to like supply his mind with what it needs to be able to learn and make good decisions, so then that would be tzaddik. But if he decides to eat it to satisfy his desires, so then that's not a good.
All right, so that makes sense, but I'm going to see if maybe you could propose something else. Could you say that, like the Rambam gives a very specific case. Like he doesn't just mention any tzedakah. He says specifically the case of a mashkon. Can you say that maybe that case is less, can you say that case is less like fundamental to his nature, and therefore you can actually call the act of giving him like his cloak back to sleep in, like necessary for his nature, so that wouldn't be tzedakah, whereas a case where you're giving like a starving person food, that actually would be tzedakah. Because of what you're doing to him.
I hear the argument. Okay, so Michael's making a textual argument in the Rambam that the Rambam only talks about this one example of returning a collateral to the poor man, and would say something different if it were something that was like an actual need, like food or something like that. I hear that argument. My counter argument, which I'm not like sticking to, but my counter argument is that the reason why the Rambam's using that example is because that's where the Torah calls it tzedakah. And you can ask the question, well, why does the Torah only call that tzedakah? Like, well, it's a weird case for the Torah to like this is the thing we're labeling as a tzedakah. And in fact, someone remind me to ask Isaac Lichter if he analyzed this, because he gave a shiur on this at some point, or will give a shiur on this at some point. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, can you say that he's quoting it specifically because it says it's a tzedakah for you? Like usually the Torah might just say it is tzedakah. Here it says it's for you, and that's why he says this.
Yeah,
so this
my only problem with that though is the goal of this chapter is to define what tzedakah is in general. You know, so it'd be weird that like if there are these other categories, then he should give the other categories as well.
I mean, that could be it. I mean, I think this case is more of a chiddush, like especially the way we're treating it. Like we're surprised by this. Right. He could be giving us like a more extreme example.
Yeah, in fact, sorry, we actually didn't end up we didn't finish this. Let me just read this other sentence, then I'll call on the other people whose hands are raised. For example, this is another weird example. The Torah states in reference to the virtue of emunah, okay, and Abraham had emunah, okay, which is firm conviction in the truth of Hashem's word, and he accounted it to him as a tzedakah. Likewise, and it shall be a tzedakah for us if we are careful to perform this entire commandment before Hashem our God as he commanded us. Okay, so other examples. So let's actually, let's set that aside. Because I actually do have to like look into these psukim, but I don't want to get too far into those psukim. I hear your argument though. Yeah, Shmuel.
So to actually like do tzedakah where the other person gains like benefits and virtue, I don't think you could give them something like tangible, like with something
it can't be tangible, correct? Right.
You're giving someone money, they can use it to buy drugs or they can use it to buy food, right? Or if you're giving someone food, you can't ensure that they're eating that food to do good. So I think like the best way to give tzedakah to somebody where they benefit virtuously is really only intellectually, which then Marcus Aurelius says the only way someone can actually like change, like the only way you could be hurt is, you know, but on the flip side, the only way you could benefit is within yourself. So even that way, you can't even ensure that they're benefiting virtuously.
Okay, good. So this is I was hoping someone would say this, okay. And I will call on you, Isaiah and Ezra, in a second, but I just want to highlight this point, okay, that what Shmuel is saying is correct, is that nothing physical can be true tzedakah because that's not really your nature. Okay, so I was gonna say the only candidate I think for what is true tzedakah is an act of teaching. Okay, because when you teach someone, you are illuminating their mind and exposing it to truth. Now, Shmuel also says that maybe then there's like this. I think the Rambam would say that is an act, that's an intrinsic act of tzedakah when you teach somebody, okay? Presumably, assuming that you teach them correctly, meaning that you actually cause their mind to go from ignorance to knowledge about something, okay? So the Rambam would say that's definitively automatically tzedakah. Marcus Aurelius, though, who puts the good in terms of virtue and vice, in terms of choosing, I don't know if Marcus Aurelius would think that that's tzedakah because you aren't choosing for them. You are just giving them the opportunity, or you're setting them up to make a better choice, but you're not actually like helping them choose. Yeah, Shmuel, you want to add to that?
Exactly, and not only that, if you give someone, which is why I think that the fact that you can't really give someone virtue is because they can take what you taught them, like teaching, as you said, is a form of giving someone virtue and tzedakah, but their premeditation can potentially use what you taught them for the bad. So they're not really benefiting virtuously.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So so I want to add one more point to this. Okay, and then I'll call on those people whose hands are raised. And surprise, surprise, anyone know what I'm going to quote? Anyone want to take a while to guess what I'm going to quote?
Adler?
No, good guess. What pasuk?
In Yirmiyahu.
Yeah. Okay, so the way we know this is these are my two favorite psukim in the entire Tanakh. Okay, and so this is actually what the Rambam is commenting on in the chapter we're reading. Koamar Hashem al yishal chacham. This is Yirmiyahu 9, 22 and 23. Koamar Hashem al yishal chacham b'chachmaso v'al yishal hagibur b'gvuraso v'al yishal asher b'ashro. So thus says Hashem, let not the wise man praise himself about his wisdom. And here in this context, wisdom means good midos, good character traits. V'yishalo hagibur bigvuraso, and let not the strong man praise himself for his strength. And here, strength means physical perfection, whether health, strength, beauty, whatever the physical perfection is. V'yishalo ashir ba'ashro, and let not the wealthy person praise himself for his wealth. And wealth here is money, possessions, status, okay, anything that you own that's external to you. So those are the three types of excellence which we hold are not intrinsically good. Okay, so wealth is the lowest because wealth is something that doesn't actually have any connection to you at all. All right, and it could change in an instant. Like the Rambam says, you could have a ship full of all your wealth and it could sink in a moment, which is what happened to the Rambam. And it doesn't actually add to your essence. Okay, it is only instrumentally good, like we've been saying. Okay, then physical strength also is physical strength does or perfection does belong to you, but it's not intrinsically good because animals have physical strength. You know, it's only good if you insofar as your physical body. Okay, midos, character traits are good as like Reza was saying, that it is good in potential, okay, that'll help you be a better person. But then what is the only true good? So he says, the only thing that you can actually like praise yourself for, I mean, the only thing that's an actual good that you can attain, haskil of Yodoa Osi, is comprehending and knowing me with a capital M. Ki ani Hashem, because I am Hashem, ose chesed mishpat utzdaka ba'aretz, who does kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. Ki be'elech hafasti num Hashem, because in these is my desire, says Hashem. So knowledge of God, according to Judaism, is the highest good. And what we mean by knowledge of God is knowledge of the ultimate reality, which God is the ultimate reality, but any knowledge that brings you towards knowledge of the ultimate reality is the type of knowledge we value. So going back to what Shmuel was saying is, or at least what I'm saying about Rambam compared to what Shmuel is saying about Marcus Aurelius, I think Rambam would say that when you give someone knowledge of reality, knowledge of God, then that is actually doing good to them. That is tzedakah. It's tzedakah for you, but it's also tzedakah because of what you do for them. But then what Marcus Aurelius is going to say is, no, what they do with the knowledge is really up to them. And so all you can do is set them up to do good, but you can't actually you can't make that call for them. Only they can do it for themselves. Isaiah.
Yeah, so I guess what I was going to say is that I think sort of the way that you can call doing good for someone else like tzedek is because the nature of man, we're saying that doing good is to get close to do things that like are in line with your nature and get closer to that. So part of the nature of man is to do good for other people. Like we know that because that's like that's like how Hashem made the world, that he is Rachman, and like we know that the good for man is to emulate Hashem. And so enabling other people to live more in line with their nature, even if we can't define like exactly that you cause that enabling to occur, but to do actions that like try to construe that, I think are like closer to being in line with your nature.
Okay, so now Isaiah's making a third argument, okay, which is that and this is really reflected in these psukim as well, okay, because the psukim are saying that knowledge of God is the only good, but it's not just abstract intellectual knowledge of God. It's knowledge of God that leads you to do kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. Okay. And Isaiah is saying that that's also part of human nature. Human nature is not just a mind. Human nature is, what makes you human is your mind that can grasp what reality is. And part of that reality is that doing good for other humans and the world is God's will. So maybe Isaiah is saying when you do something for another person that facilitates their ability to that just facilitates their ability to choose good, then that's also good. That's also tzedakah by virtue of helping them, not just by virtue of what you're doing for yourself. I hear that argument. Yeah, see, this is a sticking point with me and Stoicism, is that I always go back and forth about like, is this a drastic difference between Judaism and Stoicism or not? This is an interesting discussion. Yeah, Ezra?
I just had a question on the term preferred indifferent. It implies that it's like you're indifferent. It doesn't really matter. But I think it really should be stronger than that, because there are a lot of things which are really necessary, which are preferred indifferent. Like, for example, food. Like food, even according to Marcus Aurelius or according to the Rambam,
Yeah.
isn't really necessary, isn't like inherently good for you, but without it, you're going to die really quickly and you won't be able to get virtue or knowledge or whatever it
Right.
is. So I think there should be much more of an emphasis and like realization that it is really important, even though it's preferred and different.
Yeah, so you're saying that preferred is too weak of a term?
Yeah, you could say like not inherently good, but still very
Right.
important.
Yeah, I need to look a little bit more into the terminology and see. It's one of the things that no matter which Stoic translator I've seen, they always translate it as preferred indifference and dispreferred. But I don't know if there's like some sort of like hidden connotation with what they mean of like, because yeah, for us, prefer is like, oh, I prefer not to have my flesh combed. Like it's very, yeah. Yeah, and also just to mention, there are things that they say are truly indifferent, like the example that the Waterfield gives, as he says, the number of hairs on your head. Okay, like is truly indifferent. It makes absolutely no difference to your not even to facilitate your pursuit of the good. Yeah, I hear the critique. Yeah, Michael. Oh, sorry. One more point is one possible reason why they use a mild term is in order to reinforce that you shouldn't get caught up in these things. Like by framing it as I prefer this, you're kind of forcing your psyche to recognize that like this is not truly good. It's just something that facilitates the good, so it's like it's a counteracting measure.
Yeah, I was going to say something like that. Like it's like your orientation toward it, and that's all that it is.
Right. It's a preference. Right. And what I was saying is true is that yeah, you need food to live, but in terms of like me and my good, then that's it's not critical of that. Yeah, Michael.
I mean, you said that I think you said that the Rambam would say that teaching somebody Dias Hashem would be like objectively good, right?
I would think so, yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I understand because the reason I thought you were going to quote Adler because I thought if I remember correctly, Adler says that teaching somebody is just aiding their own discovery. So shouldn't it be the same thing as when you give somebody food where you're only making it easier for them, but in reality, it's their actual understanding of it, which they're the ones responsible for it, that's actually going to make it good.
Let me modify something to sidestep that, even though it's a good point, is assuming it is possible to teach someone, then teaching someone would be a real act of good, of tzedakah, right? Michael's referencing what I always call the best essay on teaching and learning ever, which is called Teaching and Learning by Mortimer Adler, in which he says that all learning is a process of discovery on the part of the learner, and the only thing a teacher can do is facilitate them on their own discovering. So you can't actually teach someone in a real sense. Yeah, fair point. Yeah.
But then we can ask you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Michael. Back to Michael. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah. So I mean, but if you say that it is real tzedakah, then you can't agree with like the fundamental Stoic idea that nothing outside of you can be objectively good or bad. Because like, for example, if you're on your way to like a lecture and then you get kidnapped, that objectively is bad for you because you've now lost out on knowledge. Whereas if you say that it's still your job to handle knowledge, then you can still say it's a preferred indifferent or an unpreferred indifferent.
Okay, so that's something. Hold on to that thought because I actually have an example that I want to go through with that in a second. Yeah, Reza.
So if you're reducing the opportunity cost for someone to bring their psyche in line with the truth, then that is tzedakah or the good for you. It's like it's like specifically like the opportunity cost between them and like their like ideal but only that.
Their ideal human functioning, maybe.
Yeah,
that's a good way to say it. I like it thinking about it in terms of opportunity cost. Yeah, Isaiah, you wanted to add something?
I guess I kind of forgot a little bit what I was going to say, but I guess pushing back against the point that like, oh, let's say you're on your way to go to a lecture and then like something stops you from getting to that lecture, and that's therefore like bad for you, is like you can always learn from whatever situation you're in. So you might be learning different material, but like your mind always has the ability to gain more knowledge.
Right. Yeah. So I was going to say the same thing. So I'm going to just show you this was the first. This is not the best example of this, but this is the first place I ever encountered this. Not ever encountered this. It's the first place that I realized this idea. This is Pasuk in Mishlei, and no one is in Shiur right now who was there at the time. Okay, but it says, "B'chol derachacha da'ehu v'hu yasher orchosacha." in all your ways know him with a capital H, and he will straighten your paths. Okay, so the fake Radak, okay, and I'm pretty sure it's the fake Radak. Okay, this is a whole dispute about who wrote this commentary that is called the Radak, but it seems to not be the Radak. Says B'chol derech ha'chada'ehu, klomar takir hakel tazkirehu. I'm not sure how to punctuate that. In other words, recognize God and recall him. The Teda be'emes kihu yachin tza'adecha, and know in truth that he establishes your footsteps. Okay, meaning that God is the cause of your ability to act in terms of like making decisions. O pirush da'ihu gadlehu, or know him could also be translated as glorify him. Kumo va'idacha b'shem, like it says in Shemos 33:17. Shetugumu uravisach. It means I will make you great. Okay, v'im ta'aseh, if you do this, hu yisala yiyarsha orchosecha, he, God, will straighten your paths. And here's the key phrase: shlo yavo v'lo yizdamilcha davar chet u'michshol, that nothing will come or befall you, no sin or stumbling block, like I guess obstacle is a better word, or obstacle will befall you. Okay. Inyan Shamru, as Chazal say, as the sages say, Habalatar Messianoso, one who comes to be purified is assisted. Okay, so let me tell you the circumstances under which I saw this, and I'll use that as illustration of the pasuk, and then I'll respond to Michael. Is that I think this was in 2021. And it was like after a very long time of I think it was 2021 of this is when in the darkness of COVID, and maybe it was the summer of 2020, whatever it was. I was flying back to New York, and I think I got to the airport, and then like I think we got on the plane. I might be mixing up two memories of all the bad things that happened with the airplane stuff. We got onto the plane, and then they had a mechanical failure, and like they said we're working on it, and then they like finally kicked us off of the plane and said, sorry, no flights today, because this was the only flight that was going out. You got to go back the next time. So what I did was I came home and I gave a shiur on this pasuk, and it was a shiur to my Shalhevet 2019 class, which is very very Mishlei oriented crew, and we ended up like unlocking this idea. And the idea was, it was like one of these like meta reference ideas that no matter what situation you're in, you can gain knowledge. Okay, whether knowledge of external reality, knowledge of yourself, knowledge of decision making, whatever it is, and therefore nothing bad can actually happen to you, because you can use anything as an opportunity for gaining knowledge. Okay, and I would modify this with Marcus Aurelius's thing, which is you can use any situation as an opportunity for virtuous choice. Or if you want to go with Viktor Frankl, that's the whole idea in his book Man's Search for Meaning, that he found himself in I forgot which concentration camp it was. But like, and he was, he thought that this was actually bad, but he used it as an opportunity to study human behavior, So the point is that that you can use any situation that you're in for knowledge. And so going back to what Michael was saying is, if you get kidnapped on the way to a shiur, on the way to then you can use, it's true you missed out on that particular knowledge of the shiur, but you can still be involved in knowledge and in choice. Yeah. David?
Yeah, I'm not clear if this is what you're saying or not, but I mean, it sounds like you can't really pass judgment on whether this was a good or a bad. I mean, I think you could say it was a bad that you missed out on the shiur, and it was a good that you gained some other knowledge that you thought about and reflected on it.
Yeah.
It just sounds like, if I'm clear what you're saying, that you just can't pass an overall judgment, that there was indeed a bad and there was indeed a good. You just can't weigh the two out.
Okay, I am saying that, but let me go extreme for 1 second. Is death bad?
No.
Why not?
Well, if it doesn't change who you are as a person, then you haven't been changed.
Okay, but like, aren't you losing out on opportunities to gain knowledge?
True. Yeah, I don't think it has changed your. I still think the death itself hasn't changed your character. I mean, it wasn't a missing out on further opportunity, but
Okay.
I think it is the way the world is. If you die, then
okay,
you
right.
died. I don't think
Okay,
anything has
right.
changed from that.
Right. So thinking death is bad. Right? In other words, that every human being dies. Okay. And we would prefer not to die right now. I mean, that's definitely the case. But everyone has to die. So do you really think you can like avoid, like, are you so deluded that you think you can avoid death forever? No, right? So getting kidnapped on the way to Shiur is just like a microcosm of death. You know, I don't know. I'm not making the full argument here, but what I'm saying is that you are a physical being in a physical world that cannot be involved in knowledge 24/7, and there are times when that's going to have to get interrupted, and and this I think is what David was going to say, which is that you ultimately also don't know how you would use whatever the knowledge is that you would have gotten. Maybe the experience of getting kidnapped ends up being something that you can actually utilize in your development much, much more than whatever you would have gotten at the Shiur, you know? So I don't know if this answers the question, but I think it's it's something that's relevant on the table. Okay, now I got to go to David, and I got to say right now that I don't know if either of you have noticed this, but only this year, David, have I slipped calling you David, and only David have I slipped this year a couple times saying David, but it's going to be even more confusing because now you're in the same room. But yeah, okay, yeah, David.
Well, that's kind of like an extreme example, but like if someone were to get like a head injury or something, wouldn't that
right
like be losing knowledge? Like
yeah, right. So that's
sense?
actually a good example between death and kidnapping, right? Is that if someone knocks you on the head and impairs your ability to think, isn't that a harm? Right? That's the question, right? So what's the answer? Anyone want to answer? You can go ahead and say.
Well, I'm not really sure what it does to you when you hurt your head. But if you actually lose knowledge like permanently,
Yeah,
then
let's say you lose knowledge permanently.
well, yeah, so then I'd say in a certain sense, I mean you could still use the same comparative thing you were saying before.
Yeah.
But in a certain sense it would be worse.
Right. Okay, you would think that. Yeah. Shmuel, were you gonna say something else?
Yeah, well, there's an infinite amount of knowledge, and
right.
You know, you do lose knowledge in a sense because you lost an entire, you know, bit of yourself. But then also what it does is it's a very positive thing because it gives you the opportunity to learn something, relearn something new about yourself and learn something completely new about yourself and the world. It gives you a completely different set of knowledges.
Right. It's a different set of knowledge. And there's a couple books about this that I don't remember the titles, but one book was written by someone who was a neurologist. I think it was a she, and she was getting Alzheimer's. And so she wrote a book as a neurologist as she was getting Alzheimer's, like charting her discoveries and her knowledge about that process. So that's that. So Shmuel's argument is similar to the argument that W was starting to make, which is that like, yeah, there's infinite knowledge. You're not going to get all of it, and it's just a question of what the knowledge is, you know. So I think that is one approach. No, were you going to say something about this question?
I was just going to say the same thing. You have the opportunity to start from where you are and learn differently, and
yeah,
it might ultimately, you know, wind up being better in some
right.
ways.
And I'll throw one more thing in here. And again, this is a whole can of worms, which is that I'm not even, this is another thing I go back and forth on. I'm not even certain that Judaism values knowledge. Okay, let me let me explain that for 1 second here. Okay. What I mean by that is I think what Judaism values is the pursuit of knowledge. Okay. And the proof of that, I think, the proof that Judaism does hold this, I think, is, you know, you look at, if you open up Avraham Avinu's mind and you open up the Rambam's mind and you open up Einstein's mind and you ask yourself who had more knowledge, who had a more correct knowledge of the universe, we would definitely say Einstein did, you know, I think. But, you know, so then why do we say that Avram was on such a high level, or the Rambam on a high level, or Moshe Rabbeinu? Because what really matters is your attachment to knowledge. And you can get an attachment to knowledge, and we can find out, you know, all the knowledge that we have right now about science, you know, hundreds of years in the future, we're going to find out, maybe 100 years in the future, we'll find out is wrong. So it's the seeking of the knowledge and the using of that part of your self, which to like orient yourselves towards knowledge and seek it. I think that might be what Judaism values. And if that's true, so then even if someone knocks you on the head and you lose memory, or even if someone impairs your ability to like be involved in knowledge, so you can still be involved in knowledge to the extent that you can, given the circumstances that you're in. Yeah. Okay, just in the chat, Racist says, isn't true knowledge knowing that you know nothing, thus learning? Yeah, I mean that's what Plato holds. That is true, and that might be what we hold also. I don't know. Yeah, okay. Michael's been waiting patiently. Yeah, Michael.
I think rather than address specifically what you said about my case where you're like kidnapped,
yeah,
I'll just ask I think a more fundamental question.
Yeah,
which is, I mean, this is different. This is different than what you're saying about what Judaism holds, but I think at the very least the Rambam seems to hold that it's knowledge itself. At least what determines your chelik and olam haba, he says, is based on your actual knowledge.
Right. Okay.
So it seems to. Well, can I?
No,
I just want to finish the question. Is that it seems to me that I don't, even though functionally or like pragmatically, I see what you're saying, that having this idea that only your actions can truly benefit you will ultimately lead to the best outcomes, because like you'll be likely to look for the obstacles the way, stuff like that. But I don't know if Judaism can actually, if you hold that Judaism holds, like the Rambam seems to, that actual knowledge is what's good, then I don't think you can actually say that nothing outside of you can hurt you. Because I think if somebody kills you while you're young, that does lower your perfection, objectively speaking, at least based on Judaism.
All right. So
again, the Rambam, sorry, not Judaism.
Yeah. Going to right. So what Michael's saying about the Rambam does seem to be true, which is that the Rambam holds that your portion in olam haba is determined by what you know, and actual knowledge, not just your attachment to knowledge. So first of all, based on that, I was going to answer Ezra's question in another way, which is that and I don't know what I mean. Okay, I'm going to say this at the outside. I don't know what I mean. If someone hits you on the head, they can injure your brain, but they can't hit your soul. Okay. And the reason why I don't know what I mean is because I still don't understand the difference, or what the relationship is between the brain and the soul. Okay. And we're not going to go into that, but the Rambam definitely holds that the brain and the soul are not the same thing. Okay. And your brain is what is the organ, again, I've quoted this before, but I'll quote it again. This is the Mortimer Adler, fun statement about the relationship between the soul and the brain, which is, you don't think with your brain, but you can't think without it. Okay, meaning the brain is the organ through which the non-physical soul operates. And so, for example, when someone, let's say, like when Rav Soloveitchik gets Alzheimer's, and loses his ability to think and loses all of his knowledge, we don't say that his portion in olam haba is diminished. We say that whatever the soul is, the soul has that knowledge, and when the brain deteriorates and then eventually dies, the soul exists in olam haba. Okay, how that works, what that means, I have no idea. Okay, and so that's another answer to Ezra's question, that you're not impairing that. But a whole other question is, would the Rambam even hold that today? Like, that was based on an idea of how the soul worked, and it's not so clear to me that the Rambam would hold that, and that's why I don't really know what Judaism holds about that either. So that's an open question to me. Yeah, Michael, you want to add to that?
All right, but I think if you just go within the Rambam system, I don't see how you can say that objectively nothing outside of you can harm you.
Yeah, maybe the Rambam does take issue with that.
Also, I mean, I think also, like, I mean, I guess the word ra is hard to define, but he does say that people can actually inflict ra on each other, that the universe can inflict ra on you.
Right.
Which, I mean, I guess you could say that ra could be interpreted as an unpreferred indifferent, but it seems
that's a good point. That is a good point. That the Rambam's theory of evil is such that evil can exist, or ra, right? Badness, harm, whatever can befall. Ra is defined as privation, or ra is privation, is lack of something, and you can have that, and people can inflict it on each other. Yeah, so it's possible the Rambam won't hold that. Again, like I said, I go back and forth on this. Yeah, Ezra?
Yeah, 2 points. First, to Michael's point, while it may be true he holds that there is evil, I think the main point we're making still stands, and there's no, just like death, it happens in its reality. If it's evil or not, shouldn't really matter in terms of your functioning. You should still, like, use the obstacle as the way and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and the second point, maybe this is too tangential, but I would question your premise that Einstein.
This whole shiur is tangential. I don't know if you've noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but Yeah, I would question your premise that Einstein knew more about the universe than the Rambam or Abraham, because I think that knowledge fundamentally comes down to knowing causes of things. So if Einstein didn't really understand the cause of all the details that he knew, as opposed to Avraham Avinu who understood God, I'd say he really has the greater knowledge.
Okay, how about this? How about Rambam knew more than Avraham Avinu?
Well, there would be a question of who has a greater understanding of God, which I don't really know.
Right. I'm making the assumption on the fact that Rambam had Avram Avinu to learn from, But yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Well, construct whatever hypothetical you want and then go with that. But I get your point, though. Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah. Raquel.
Oh yeah. I was gonna ask in terms of knowledge being like guiding us towards good, if there's like a hierarchy of knowledge where like in the case where you're kidnapped, you would have learned something, either more important or more impactful to self versus
That's
like
another good point. Right. So the Rambam definitely holds that there's a hierarchy of knowledge, right? That metaphysics is the ultimate knowledge, physics is lower than that. And then there's like stuff like math and logic, which are only valuable because they train your mind, and then presumably within the world of the physical world, knowledge of like what we call physics would be the highest, and then like chemistry, biology. I don't know exactly how we would make it a hierarchy. So yeah, it would seem like you could have better or worse within that. Yeah, that's a good point, right? So it is sounding like not all knowledge is equal. See, this is the interesting thing. According to Marcus Aurelius, when the only good is choice, virtuous choice, or choice for vice. I'm sorry, the only good is virtue. So then it really is all equal. Just making the best decision in whatever situation you're in is the good. But there's no room for a hierarchy of knowledge or any of the questions we're talking about here. So it does seem like there's a big difference between him and what Torah holds, or at least the Rambam. Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly respond to what Ezra said, because I'm not sure if I'm going to disagree with him, but I just want to say that I think within the Rambam system, you have to say that death is Ra. Again, I mean, he says that privation is Ra, and I think you'd have to say that. But I think he would also, I think he'd agree that it's from a pragmatic standpoint, it's best to think of death as not being bad. Because then, like he said, like obstacles the way type of things, where you're not going to be preoccupied, all the benefits of reacting to life like the Stoics describe. So you have the benefits, but like I don't know if you can objectively say that it's true that death is not bad and nothing outside of you is bad.
Right. I mean, and I would say not just pragmatically, but like, I don't know unless this is what you mean by pragmatically, but God designed the world in such a way where all creatures die. So viewing that as bad is a denial of that God saw everything he made, he created, and behold, it was very good,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, well,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, doesn't the Rambam say though that like the system is as good as it could be, but there is still entropy, and so
but good as it could be is the type of good that I think we're talking about. And in fact that you have that Gemara Ravi Meir says Tov Ma'od Zo Maves, that when the Torah says it's very good, that is referring to death.
Like in theory, if you lived for forever or whatever it is, wouldn't you then gain more knowledge? Like,
yeah, I mean, again, this is why I hear the arguments you're making from the value system as laid out by the Rambam, but to me, it seems, okay. I'm going back and forth still. Yeah, I want to think about that for next time. Yeah, Shmuel.
I beg to differ on your stance that being kidnapped and making the shiur is on the same level according to Marcus Aurelius, because
just to clarify, I didn't just to make sure that we're on the same page here. What I meant by saying that it's all equal is that in either case, then you have the ability to make a virtuous choice.
So yeah, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I think that if you're kidnapped, you have more of an opportunity to make a virtuous choice, and because something that could be interpreted as bad, and people who are ignorant are now trying to physically affect you, and you have the choice of whether or not to be influenced by that. While there is less of a chance of actually, making because when you're in the shiur, the virtuous choice is essentially made for you to a degree, where you're already in a positive environment, with people who aren't as ignorant as the kidnappers.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it is a like automatic thing that, meaning in both situations, you're being presented with certain things that you can then make a choice with regards to. So let's say like with not like let's take this shiur and our reading of Marcus Aurelius right now is like this is presenting us with many opportunities to embrace truth and reject falsehood or the opposite, or to apply this to ourselves, or to like resist, like we are being confronted with lots and lots of choices from the knowledge itself, even though the knowledge itself is good.
Yeah, but when you're kidnapped, it's much more challenging.
Maybe, I mean, maybe yes, maybe no. It's challenging in the sense of you're being presented with physical pain and the prospect of loss. But challenging doesn't necessarily mean that it's that it is more virtuous. Choosing something that is more challenging does not mean that that's a more virtuous choice.
Your entire reality has been flipped when you're kidnapped. So when you're sitting in the shiur, your reality remains stagnant. But when you're kidnapped, your entire reality sort of changes. You're no longer free, which presents you with sort of like a much more virtuous decision of how you.
Maybe
you
for
know what I'm
some
saying?
shiur, maybe for some shiur, I don't know. I've been exposed to certain ideas that are like present me with a crossroads in terms of how I live or how I view reality. So maybe it depends on the shiur. Yeah, maybe it depends on the shiur. Okay. Let's do this because I have a really delicious preferred indifferent that is cooking right now that I want to get to eating at some point. Let's just take stock of what we have gone over, and fortunately, unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to spend another time on this because we didn't get to the thing I wanted to get to, which is like this cooperation example. Okay, so we'll have to talk about that next time. So what we spent this time discussing here is what is the good? No, what is it? We really went into depth on what does it mean to do good, or to suffer bad, right? To do, I guess, to suffer good or bad. No, I don't want to say suffer. To experience good or bad, to receive good or bad. Okay. And is it seems like right now where we're landing is that according to Marcus Aurelius, it really is just the only good is virtue and good choice, and the only bad is vice and bad choice. According to Judaism / according to the Rambam's presentation of Judaism, it does seem like there is an objective good for human beings of knowledge, and ignorance is an objective bad. And it seems like there's also good and bad in the universe, which we didn't really get into, of any privation. And it also seems like I'm advocating some other model, which doesn't sound like the Rambam now, of attachment to truth, okay, as good, and the pursuit of truth. And that remains to be seen whether that has any basis in Judaism or that's just my own wacky idea. And in terms of doing good to other people, it seems like the Rambam holds that when you provide someone else's need, that is tzedakah, and that is good by virtue of the fact that you are acting in line with your rational principle, and maybe also because you're helping them to live in line with their rational principle, even though you can't directly govern their choices. And it seems like Marcus Aurelius is allowing for an idea for helping people and doing good for society, but we haven't really explored that yet because that's going to be in his analogy. And just to really quickly comment on David's question, because I don't want to lose sight of it, what role should punishment play? So it sounds like what role punishment should play is punishment is, first of all, not a bad, according to Marcus Aurelius, because you can't actually harm them. But the role of punishment should either be for that person's betterment, which is to facilitate their ability to make it easier for them to choose good. So let's say, for example, like a kid, like, I don't know, like, runs out into the street without looking both ways, and the parent says you're grounded. I don't know. So like, if it's probably not a good punishment, but if the punishment is designed to educate the kid, then the punishment is facilitating their kid's ability to make the proper choice. Or the other purpose of a punishment is if this person is a public hazard, like a murderer, and this person is going to go and do actions to people that are going to make it more difficult for them to pursue the good, then the punishment can be designed to like remove them from society or to prevent them from engaging in that harm. So let's say like giving someone a speeding ticket, is not a harm, but if it makes them less inclined to speed, that is going to be conducive to their good choices and to other people's good choices. Yeah, David.
But with the second point, isn't that kind of going against what Marcus Aurelius is saying, where like their actions aren't affecting other people?
Yeah, but we are acknowledging that their actions can affect other people in the realm of indifference. And indifference do make it easier or harder for people to actually make good choices. So if you speed and then you injure a pedestrian and now they have to recover, you are burdening them with something that is a dispreferred indifferent, and it's going to make it hard for them to be involved in pursuing virtue, even though you're not directly harming them. You're harming their body. Yeah, Ezra.
Can I try to combine your theory of the good and what we were saying?
Please do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you could say that really the good is like an attachment to knowledge. So that would demand two things. First of all, it would demand actually having the knowledge, but it would also allow for like greater and weaker relationships to that knowledge, and that's part of the attachment. So like if you don't have the knowledge, that's bad. But also if you have all the knowledge, but you don't really relate to it as like a reality, then that's also bad. So you need a combination of both.
Okay. So therefore you do need knowledge. But you need both. You need knowledge and the relationship with it. Yeah, I don't know if that solves all the problems, but I like that formulation. Yeah, Michael?
I mean, my comment is based on the premise that what determines your chelik and olam haba is the good, which I don't know if that's a fair premise.
Right.
But if it is,
yeah,
if it is though, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Rambam says, I don't know if he'd hold this today, but based on what he says, that olam haba is like this natural result where your knowledge and your intellect just kind of remains because they're not physical.
Right.
So it still seems like it's just like the extent to which your intellect is perfected. So obviously your perspective on knowledge is part of your intellect, but it still seems like it would just be to what extent your intellect has correct ideas and is capable.
Yeah, I hear, and it gets a little bit more tricky with the Rambam in the 8th parak of Shemona Prakim with the veils, because he holds that the veils are intellectual virtues, and that really, like, what's the difference between like knowledge and intellectual virtue? Yeah, oof, yeah.
I would just respond to Michael by saying that I don't think, like, when he means knowledge, like of the intellect, I don't think that he means pieces of information. And I think part of knowing something with your intellect is viewing it as reality, like by definition.
Yeah, right. Yeah, perspectives of reality might be a good combination for describing, or I guess orientations towards reality might be something that is describing intellectual virtues and ideas or knowledge or theories or whatever we want to call them. Yeah. It's very tempting to then go from here into a whole question about what we mean by knowledge, which we kind of went into, but I don't think that's going to be what we take up next time. Yeah, David?
Yeah, just asking to Ezra insofar just to clarify, because I was going to say like a nafkamina case where you'd have like if the person just dies right now. So insofar as I'm just like reading the way you put it down on my eyes. The relationship to knowledge. So when so far as the person died right now, they definitely have like as good as a relationship as they could have had. So like that wasn't a harm, it wasn't a bad thing in that regard. Basman, what do you mean so far as needing you need knowledge? Is that going to still be a bad thing if they die right now?
Yeah, well, I would say both. It depends how you mean the term bad. Like their knowledge isn't getting lost and their relationship isn't getting lost. But in theory, if they lived longer, they could have strengthened their knowledge and relationship. So like it depends what you mean by bad.
Right. I do want to let's just leave this as a question to think about. Question for next time is death bad? And why? Okay. And I realize that we've answered that a couple times here, but I just want to think about that some more. I want to end off with just 2 points before we stop. First of all, I just want to remind us that that, you know, in a Mishlei Shiur or in a Tehillim Shiur, then we know what the format is like. You know, we have a pasuk and we're trying to get a main idea and have applications. This is still unexplored territory. Okay, so we're gonna have to get a feel for what we want this type of session to be. You know, so there's gonna be some I don't want to call them growing pains because it might be growing pleasures, but like it's gonna take some getting used to figure out like what we want this to be. Like it doesn't. I'm inclined to like try to bring it to a close and like get concrete ideas, but maybe that's not what it is. You know, growing preferred neutrals. Yeah. The second point I want to make is a reminder that just like in Mishlei, there is a benefit that you get from the main idea, but the chief benefit is from the discussion and the thinking about the ideas. So that's definitely true here, that I think this is supposed to be a philosophy shiur, and being engaged in thinking about these topics is what is philosophy, like love of knowledge. Like that's what we're doing. We're like, even if we don't walk away with an understanding of what he meant, the fact that we're talking about these all eternally relevant questions of what is good and what is bad and what is knowledge and what is what is what's our attitude towards death, like that is the activity. So I feel like there's a natural tendency to if we end with having had all these ideas flying around, to feel like, oh well, like we didn't get answers, or we didn't get, that's the wrong orientation. Like remember, Socrates barely knew, like walked away with any answers. Like he walked away with more confusion than he walked in with. That's progress. Progress is opening up these questions and like being exposed to these different ways of thinking. And this is not the last time we're going to think about these things, you know? So the benefit that we have of doing this in a group, which we can't get alone, is being exposed to so many different perspectives and ways of talking about it. So, or ways of thinking about it. So I think that's like that's what I want out of this. I mean, again, I'm in this for myself, and getting like the input from all of these minds is gonna like infuse these questions with new layers of nuance, and that's what I'm trying to get out of it. So hope you're getting out of it what you want as well. But yeah, all right. So we'll to be continued next time. Okay.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night, everyone. Enjoy your all your preferred indifference, and hopefully some good also.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.